Hey, you're listening to Cracking the Code, the podcast for leaders building and growing service-based businesses. If you are in legal or medical or financial services, if you have letters behind your name that qualify you to do what you do for a living, you are in the right place. I am your host, Rob Riggs, here to bring you intel and access that are designed to decode how technology can be and should be impacting your growth. All right, let's get into it. Okay, today I am sitting down with Bill Reynolds, president of Element 502, a digital marketing and web design agency out of Louisville, Kentucky. Now, before you think another agency owner, you need to hear Bill's story because his business model breaks every rule in the agency playbook, and it's worked out well for him. So, Bill, thanks so much for being here. Why don't you take a minute and tell us about yourselves?
Sure. Thanks, Rob. And I'm excited to be here as well. I shared with you before we started recording. This is a podcast I've been looking forward to. So thanks.
Awesome.
Bill Reynolds, Element 502. We're out of Louisville, Kentucky. To say it right, you just need to drop all of the vowels out of it. So it's just Louisville. So it just sounds like it's a
There you go.
mouthful of marbles. So here in Louisville, we're fancy word is a full service digital agency. I tell people that just means we do all the things. We can do traditional, what people think of. We can design a magazine ad or do logos or those kind of layouts, or we can go digital wherever we need. So it's just up to you. We want to try to make sure that whatever we put in front of you is sized for what you need and not just trying to fit you into into a package or into a design.
Excellent. So, Bill, one of the first things that caught my attention about you is your 599 haircut story. I'd love for you to give us the background in that and how that's impacted the way you do business today.
Oh, sure. So it's happened years ago. I was going through town. I needed a haircut, and one of the national chains that has, walk-in service haircuts with multiple locations, I'm not going to say their name, was advertising the 599 haircut. And I was like, oh man, I'd really need a haircut. So I pulled in, and it's like an hour and a half wait is what they've got in front of them.
Wow.
I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I can't wait an hour and a half. I really need a haircut because I had an event later in the week. And so I wanted to get my haircut before then and have a day or two for it to kind of figure out what it was going to do. So I pulled into a local barber shop, just a single, the guy in a chair. I go in and I sit down and I'm talking to him, and he's got his prices are clearly posted on the wall, and his haircuts are $15. And so I sit down and he puts a little cape on me. He starts, wetting my hair, doing all the barber things. And I said, hey, let me ask you a question. He's like, oh, okay, yeah. And I said, now, full transparency, I'm not haggling, I'm not negotiating, I'm not asking I'm not doing any of this. I'm just curious because of my background of working in marketing. I said,
Mhm.
I see your haircuts are $15. He goes, yeah, $15 sounds right there on the wall. I said, okay, well, what's the difference between your $15 haircut and a $5.99 haircut that I was waiting in line to get? He kind of looks at me in the mirror and he smiles. He goes, well, that's easy. He said, I fix $5.99 haircuts. I was like, oh,
Love
that's a
that.
good story. And so we talked, and so his whole thing was, it's if you're going to be a price-driven person, then you're going to get a price-driven response. If you want something good, then you're going to have to pay a little bit more sometimes. But for that higher price, you also ought to expect someone to actually care about the service they're doing, tailoring it towards you. He didn't say like for $15 you're going to get this haircut. He said,
Right.
I'm going to cut your hair. And so then because he was asking me, the first thing he didn't do is wet it and just kind of do all the other kind of prep stuff. But then he's like, so what are we doing today? How is this supposed to work? Where are you parting your hair? How short do you cut? All these other things. So he tailored it to me, but I was paying a premium for a good haircut that was what I wanted, not just like you get this one. And it wasn't a guarantee. I mean, he can't put hair back on if it was wrong, but it was
Mhm.
also like you expected a higher level of service. And so that's where, as we talked through, he said, the other guys, they do okay, but if you're getting a $6 haircut, do you really think they're going to take the time and the effort to put that in? Because they're going to have to turn that chair three times in the same amount of time as he turns it once to try to
Right.
make that money. And so
Mhm.
that's just a volume play. And so that means everybody looks like an assembly line haircut. So and that's kind of the way that we run our agency. If you go to our stuff, we don't have packages. I don't have pricing. I don't have that because I want to make sure it matches what you need. And also, I don't want you
Mm.
to try to put yourself into a box that's gonna be a price number driven and instead of a value driven. And at the same time, I get it. There's sometimes that value may be out of your price point. You may just need the 599. That's okay.
Right.
That's why, just like if you're buying a car, you can go buy a Kia. You don't have to have a Mercedes, but don't expect
Hmm.
Mercedes quality out of a Kia because you're trading price and value in there. So that's
Right.
my 599 haircut story that really
Nice.
changed a lot of stuff. So yeah.
That's interesting because not everybody is supposed to work with everybody else, right? It's you've got to choose your best clients, where you can make the biggest impact, and who will be able to afford and appreciate the service that you provide. Love that. Um, Good stuff. So, you've been doing this a minute, as have I, and we've got a little gray in places that didn't used to exist. What's the biggest shift you've seen in how businesses? So there's been a lot of shift in the tools, right? The like AI is the hot button right now, but it's not the first hot button to impact our industry. What are the biggest shifts that you've seen over the years, past 20 plus years? In how businesses approach their digital presence.
One of the big things that's happened is because like social has showed up more and more over the years. At first, every business was like, "Oh, we need all of the socials. We need to be on Instagram and Snapchat, TikTok, and all these things." And
Mm.
you always ask them
Hmm.
like, "Why?" Well, because my customers are out there. Well, based on what? How are you doing that?
Mm.
I And so that's been a big one where people are being a little bit more selective about where they're putting their messaging. But one thing that I see that's still there is uh, the the propensity for people to always want to do their own research and then figure out the shortest distance on their own. And
Mm.
so they'll be like, oh, well, my niece, she's on Instagram, so I'll just have her do all my corporate Instagram posts. Like,
Very good.
well, it doesn't for a business and for a person, they don't always work the same. Or you get the
Yeah.
client that's always saying, I want to be viral, I want to be this. Well, why? Because if you're a restaurant and your restaurant is here local, are people, I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, and you're on the other side of the country. So if Rob is like, "Oh man, this is great," and likes and shares and does all this with all your friends, well, what's the chances that you're going to jump on a plane or or jump in a car, drive to Louisville, and eat at my restaurant?
Right.
So unless I'm just trying to get, like social credit, it's not going to help me. So really being open to those conversations. And then the other big shift I've seen, you hit on it with AI, is where, it's just like every year around tax time, H&R Block say all people are tax people. Well, no, that's why there's tax accountants and CPAs. I mean, for some people that works. And so the same kind of thing. I see that continual shift into I can do this myself, and people are showing up with here's the logo I've already designed. Here's these things. And then as being
Right.
in an agency, then we start asking fun questions about licensing and real ownership, and how is this
Mm.
something that's going to stand the test. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's just the actors change, but unfortunately the scripts a lot of times stay the same, Rob.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, you lay out a great point. Like my mom uses H&R Block and she's fine with that. But I can't. So there's too many moving pieces right?
Yep,
There's and where you need a service that is not your, 599 buzz cut, same as everybody else is
exactly.
getting. You need special attention. Yeah, no, love that, love that. So you and I operate similarly. We don't have long-term contracts. Our clients own all of the work that we produce. And has that, so I know you operate kind of the same. And that's, to me, that's how you operate transparently. You operate with dignity and that sort of thing. But have you ever seen that impact you negatively? Have you lost business because of, you taking the high road?
I've seen it happen a couple of times, and they're not all pretty stories. And so I
Sure.
won't go into the details, and I'll change the
Sure,
names
sure.
to protect the guilty. But so sometimes sometimes we've never made it out of the batting cage, just where people are like,
Yeah,
"There's no way Rob's agency bid this out at 110,000, and you're telling me you could do it at 70. There's no way. You're out." And I'm
right,
like,
right.
"So you're kicking me out because my price was too low and was
Yeah.
significantly too low without even asking me like." how can I get there? So I've seen those before. That go
Mhm.
in. Sometimes though, I've also seen people. We do a rights assignment just like your agency does. Once you
Yeah,
paid for it, it's your product.
sure.
I've seen people take our spec work and not take the next milestone, and then
Mm.
suddenly I see our design show up somewhere, and I'm like,
Yeah,
oh, that's kind of gross. Actually, the
sure.
most blatant one was is that we had a museum that was working on trying to get some foot traffic attention and some other stuff for them, and so they had asked us, and so we came up with some ideas because they wanted to do all digital. They're like, digital will fix this. I'm like, digital is not your answer for someone walking down the street. It's going to be
Right.
visual. And so we went on site. We took pictures of the museum, and then went back with our designers. We did some Photoshop work and did some in situ. Like we actually mocked up like some signage and some other things that we could do and some fun things. And at least that our contact there was honest because we flapped everything. We took it to them. We lay it out and we show it. And she goes, "This looks awesome. Would you care if we gave this to our agencies so that they can go ahead and start building this out?" I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I looked at her and I said, "Now, I know you didn't mean to say this, but what it sounds like is that you're excited for all of the free work we just did to present what we're getting ready to do. And you want to take this idea and give it to your company who did none of the creative on it so that they can do the physical work and get all the credit for it."
Right.
Well, when you say it like that, it doesn't sound as nice. Well, that's kind of what happened. So,
Wow. Yeah.
so yes, I have seen it unfortunately come back to haunt us in a few places, but those
Yeah.
times are too small for me to change the way we do business or to use that as a judgment against everyone. No.
Okay. Do you still do spec work in a similar vein?
So, well, the one thing that was great about that one was that there was no digital delivery of the spec work. It was all
Okay.
physical. And so if I'm ever doing
Yeah.
spec, it's got to have one heck of a good use case behind it to get me to do it. And then secondly, we watermark and we put ownership around it like nobody's business. So
There you go.
if I'm shown to a meeting, I'll collect all the printouts before we leave.
Nice.
If I leave it, if I'm sending anything digital, it's the lowest res that you can imagine, and it's all flattened PDFs. So there's
Uh,
no printable stuff on it. It's got the watermark embedded in it, so you can't use it. So if you want to try to recreate from scratch, you're going to be working uphill. So go in. So no, not as much. Early on,
sure.
we did a lot just because you really want to say like, look at me, I can really do this. But
Yeah.
now we thankfully we have a book of business behind us that we can use to draw back on and say, yes, I've done something similar. Here's an example. We can do yours. Let's start talking about what that project would look like.
There you go. Hey, this is Rob Riggs, and I wanted to take just a second to tell you about Code Conspirators, our sponsor here. And we are a technology focused performance marketing agency serving professional service firms. So that's legal, medical, financial, engineering. If you have to take a test to do what you do for a living, we help you grow your practice with websites and apps, software, and performance marketing. That's organic, paid ads, retargeting, conversion optimization. And we're also doing a whole host of things with CRM, AI, and automation that's been bringing our clients tremendous value. If you're curious at all, go to codeconspirators.com to learn more. Now back to the show. And I'm assuming you have a good way of pointing to the fact that what we did with somebody met their criteria, but what we're going to do for you is it's going to be personalized. It's going to be different. It's not cookie cutter, right? Um, that so early on in the business, we took on spec work. We competed against other agencies, and I remember one specific instance. Again, won't mention any names, but we were up against a big room. It was several agencies. I think we got down to the top three, and they asked for what would you do for our homepage. We were up against kind of, and they printed out from three agencies and on their conference room table, and we won. But they were the hardest people to work with, and had the highest expectations. And I think I never did another piece of spec work that was unpaid again, just because it was grueling. We put our heart and soul into it, and then it just got beat down continually.
Oh,
But I
I
don't know
know
if you've
that
got
feeling.
seen that. Yeah, sure. But
Yeah,
we we're better for it.
Yeah, I tell people when they come to work for us that look, one of the quickest things that we can learn in our onboarding is how to make your toes as short as possible and your skin as thick as possible because someone's going to
Absolutely.
stomp on it and they're going to start poking you. It's nothing personal, even if they say personal jabs, it's just their opinion. And so,
Yeah.
it's but that's hard because we're creative people. And when you
Yeah.
like you just said, you heart and soul, that's not just a metaphor, that's truth. That's you took some of your creative energy and put it into this project to show it to someone else, and they look at it and go, eh. You're like, meh,
Yeah.
are you kidding me? Do you know how
Yeah.
awesome this is? Or they're like,
Yeah.
it'll look great. Let's put some starbursts and some polka dots and some things here. And you're like,
Yes.
I'm dying on the inside. But
Yes.
at the end of the day, they're your client, and so we have to we acknowledge and we guide, but ultimately they're the ones who are paying for the product, and so we have to do we have to eventually end up where they want, or else they're going to find another vendor. So
Right. Right. So, yeah, the client is not always right, but they always get what they want, right? Um, do
yep.
you, yeah, so,
Oh, I like
I
that.
assume it's, so, yeah. Um, I assume, kind of like us, you turn over access for them to manage their own website. And inevitably they'll throw up something and it breaks, or something. How or do you have ways to protect against that?
Sure, yeah. And so most of the sites that we spin up, if we're doing a web development, we host. So we offer monthly hosting
There you
as
go.
part of our
Sure.
project there. I throw in the first 3 months on every project so at least you'll stick around so that I can give you a good send off in case you're going to
Yeah.
go to someplace else. During that hosting, we've got backups, we've got revisions. We do most of our development in WordPress if it's going to be something that's going to
Sure.
have a client editing ability. And so that allows me if that I tell people, look, we back this thing up every morning at 2 o'clock in the morning. So if you make a really, really bad mistake, you're going to lose everything up till 2 o'clock in the morning. If it's not
Hmm.
super, super bad, we can usually pull it back out of revisions, and then our dev team and our stack can jump in and fix it. But yes, they are, and those could either happen in a couple of ways. I'll get somebody broke something is the phone
Yeah.
call I'll get. I don't know what happened, but somebody
Uh,
must have done something. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to show you how I know it's you, but that's okay. We'll get it
sure.
fixed. Or, they'll bring up their own page or do their own design because we counseled against it and somebody on the chain agreed with us, but they
Yeah.
eventually will get their way by not always right, but they get what they want. I love it. I'm going to use that over and over.
Right. Sure.
And
Sure.
so they put their own up to show us how smart they were on doing this. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, did you think that it ever had to run on mobile device? Did you think that it
Mm.
was ever going to hear here? Well, no, 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 no. I don't think like that. Okay. Well, so
Yeah.
so we do
Mm.
have some safeguards in some places important around there. So
Good. Okay. Yeah. And same. So, 2 decades in the industry, what is a skill or mindset shift that's been most valuable to your growth as a leader?
so two different things internally. You and I were joking about gray and new places and new faces. So,
Sure.
yeah, 20 years and plus has been a while to be around. So I've actually got multiple generations working for me. I've got one from every
Nice.
decade. From 20 years old, 30 years old. So we go all the way up into the sixes. And they're all great people, and we all work
Yeah.
together well. But not everybody thinks or acts like I do. And so that's been a
Mm.
big one. For affirmations, I, I tell one of the things that we talk that they always joke about the folks that have been working with me for a while is that like we don't do annual reviews. We do instant reviews. You'll know pretty quickly if you're doing something good or if you're not. And it's
Ah,
nothing
sure.
mean and it's not a public beat down or anything like that, but we do instant feedback. So we don't have
Nice.
to wait for it or go to the end. And if there's a dispute or you've got a different viewpoint, then sure, we can take it offline and we can talk about it. But being able to do that. But the other part is the affirmations. And that's just personally, it's not something I
Mm.
was really good at.
Yeah.
Um, that, if I grew up, yeah, I knew I was doing a good job because I was able to show up the next day and no one told me I was fired. So I was
Yeah.
doing a good job, right? Like that was
Uh-huh.
the fact I still got a paycheck. There's a lot of
Right.
folks that need somebody to go, hey, Rob, you're doing great. I saw this and it was good work.
Mm.
And you can say those every now and then, but it actually needs to be a part of a cadence, not like every Tuesday I have to do this because then it feels disingenuous, but actually
Yeah.
making sure you say it all the time and are because that's how some people are gauging their effectiveness that's going in. So that's a
Right.
big one. And then the other side is what you were talking about with the spec work and with the other things.
Hmm.
I joke that, in the early days of the industry of our agency, I would have crawled through glass. If you say, Bill, I got $100 check over here. If you'll crawl through, buddy, I'm on my knees. I'm going through it. But
Right.
now we're not that we're arrogant or anything like that, or we don't need your money or those kinds of things, but
Yeah.
we're in a different spot. And so we can make sure that we're not creating one of those situations like you were talking about to where it's just never good enough, never going to be a good relationship. And it's the ones where you're like, don't ever put that on our portfolio. We don't need anybody to know that we worked with that. We don't have to do those as much. And so that's been a nice shift that comes through.
Right.
But it's you're scared, and it's a scary place when you first set out on your own. So you can't fault anyone for making those choices throughout their career.
For sure. I noticed you phrase this as you run a spirit-led business, and I'm
Yep.
assuming there are occasions where you have to turn business down based on whatever the case may be. Do you have a fun story about that and how you turn down business opportunity and you're better for it?
Oh gosh, yeah. If I tell you some of the stories, then the people who brought it will know exactly that I
Sure.
was talking about them. And we actually have some other the neat part about it. So let me try to figure. Okay, I know how I can do this. So I'm going to use you as my actor because since I'm
Sure.
talking to you, it makes it go easy. So I'm working with you, Rob, and you're like, hey, I got my Red Stanley Cup company. Can you help me build up marketing and get people to buy my Red Stanley Cups? I'm like, sure. So we start putting together, and then you come to me and you're like, hey, Bill, I've got this nude abstract art. Can you help me with that? And I'm like, well, that really isn't something that I'm behind. I don't like the way that you're presenting this. I'm not like, a Puritan or a prude, but just what you're doing is not something I personally agree with. So
Yeah.
I don't want to, I can't help you market something that I don't believe in. Either I feel it's disingenuous, like you're doing something that's not true, or it's a product or service I wouldn't want to see other people getting or doing.
Yeah.
And so I'll say, hey, Rom, that's just really, here's why. And I'll talk about the reasons or why it doesn't work with us. And sometimes that gets people mad and they're just, they drop some colorful metaphors and
Sure.
expletives and they leave and they try to smear a name. That happens. But a lot of times people are like, oh, well, the fact that you actually like had a conversation is kind of cool because you were telling me why and why not and what's going on.
Yeah.
And then most of the time I'll still keep your business. I'll keep the other stuff. And you're like,
Hmm.
okay, well, I'll find somebody else to do that. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I'm not like I'm not saying you're a horrible person or anything. I just don't want to see you
Right.
succeed. So
Right. Yeah.
and I don't want my name behind it helping, yeah,
Yeah.
some of those have come up. But the other side too is just the same way that you read and the way that you look at it. Uh, a lot of times I think that just fixes itself where someone's like,
Mm.
yeah, I don't want, this is not the guy I want working on it because we're
Sure.
not going to see eye to eye. And I'm like, okay, great. Doesn't mean you're a bad
Yeah.
person. It just means, hey, it's just, this isn't a place where we can work together.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. It's hard to believe, but we're at time. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you wish we had?
The one thing I always talk about is just when we do a project, we do branding, we do different things. I
Yeah.
is just making sure that everyone inside the company is speaking with the same voice, the same idea. Especially as companies
Mm.
get big, you'll be surprised how different levels of leadership or different seats view that
Right.
company or what that message or what that is. It's back to that whole Simon Sinek, the essence of why, which I
Hmm.
love.
Yeah.
So just making sure that when you're getting into marketing, you're getting into anything, making sure that everybody is feeling and saying similar things, because if you don't, then you're never going to be successful either as an agency working with somebody or as a company trying to get your message out because everybody's rowing in a different direction. So talk to professionals. Don't fall for the 5.99 unless you're wanting the bus cut and then go from there. So
Nice. For sure. Bill, most of our audience is 7 and 8 figure professional service business. What one piece of advice would you have for them for growing their business, growing their brand, et cetera?
I always tell people authenticity. It's the easiest thing to do. It doesn't take any training on it. Hopefully not anyway. Shouldn't take
Yeah,
any training to be authentic about what you're doing. And it's just like what my, mom and grandma always said, if you always tell the truth, you don't have to keep track of all your lies. So if you're
right.
authentic, your message will always resonate, and just be strong and confident in who you are, because the customer that you're supposed to have is a customer that you'll get.
For sure. Love it. Bill, thanks so much for being on today. And we'll make sure that people have access to your website in the link to your 599 haircut story.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks, Rob.
thank you for being here. All right, if that 599 haircut story didn't make you rethink how you position your own business, listen to it again. The Barber's Line I Fix $5.99 haircuts. That's master level positioning. So I love Bill's approach. He's built an agency that doesn't trap clients. If you want to dive deeper into his haircut guide to marketing ROI, head over to 599haircut.com. It's ungated, it's free content that walks through why cheap marketing costs more and how to build a brand that lasts. Links are in the show notes. I thank you for being here. Thanks to Bill as well. And talk to you next time.